can I tell you, he's been applauding the most for everyone, so we need to give it back to him double. How are you, sir? Good morning.
You know, firstly, good morning, everybody. I think the minister actually took a lot of the points I was going to raise, but I'm going to reiterate them. But this, talking about defining the future of anything, hospitality, of course, is the topic, is a really different and difficult subject, because if any of you have read a book by Morgan Housel, which is called Same as Ever, he talks very interestingly about the following, that nobody knows the future. What you know is what will continue, which is same as ever. So I would recommend to all of you, Morgan Housel, please read this book. It is extremely interesting and thought-provoking. Anyway, coming to the topic, I wanted to actually, unfortunately the minister has left, but I was at another meeting with some government officials, and we were putting forward the following, and I thought I'd share a broad statistic with you about tourism. In India, tourism as a percentage of GDP has remained flat for the last 10 years. It's about 6.8% of GDP. It's about $240 billion of value, and it employs 43 million people. The employment is the most interesting factor because it is 8.9% of India's workforce. So really, here is the most important statistic. The need of the hour in India today is employment. And tourism is a transformative sector because for every percent of GDP we create out of tourism, it increases employment by 1.3. So when I look at the global average, it's 10% of GDP. In India, if we simply take our percentage to the global average, and I'm not talking Spain or France or something, it will increase employment by 40 million people. And these are the kind of people India needs to employ, because these are relatively at the low to middle end of the skill spectrum. It will, if our international tourist arrivals, which is 11 million, just double, our current account deficit will disappear, the rupee will strengthen against the dollar. If we look at the contribution to GDP, it's $300 billion incremental. So it's so sad that as yet we haven't come out with a tourism-linked incentive in this country, but we've come out with a PLI, and to me, tourism is actually more transformative. Now, I'm going to get on to a second anecdote, and it's an anecdote I'm very fond of quoting. There were 8 golden years in 2 economies in Asia between 2006 and 2014. It was China and Indonesia. And both these economies reached what is called the magic point. And in that magic point, in the next 7 years, the rate of growth of tourism was amazing. I mean, and I'm going to give you some indications of why I think India is there today. So in 2006 in China, in 2007 in Indonesia, the household income, the household income was roughly where India is today. And in 6 years to 7 years in China and Indonesia, the household income increased by about 80% to 100%. But here's the amazing thing. The GDP doubled, but the number of consumers increased 10x. Because up to that moment, which was where we are today, it was not really a consuming economy. And that is the most important structural shift that India is going to go through in the next 5 years. So let me tell you what Wen Jiabao, who was the premier of China and the head of the economy in those golden years, said. He said, I'm like a Chinese doctor. I do not look at GDP, I don't look at all these numbers. I look at 6 or 7 things, and he called them high-frequency indicators, which is the amount of freight tonnage moving on roads and trains, the amount of steel consumed, cement consumed, jobs created, the amount of electricity consumed. So he was looking at symptoms. You know, he said, like, I'm a doctor, I take the pulse. When I asked myself, what are the, so I actually had a little study done, so it wasn't me really. I said, what are the 6 high-frequency indicators with this structural shift in demand that will define the future of Indian tourism and hospitality? And I'm going to tell you what happened in China and what's happening in India and Indonesia. In China, in those 8 years, the number of 4-lane highways went up 4x. In India, in the last 5 years, the number of 4-lane highways have gone up 2x. And Mr. Gadkari has said it's doubling in the next 4 years. 4x, same number. The number of SUVs in China increased demand 16x. SUVs are typically treated as intent to travel intercity. In India, it has already grown 11x. The number of airports in India are going to increase from 138 to 240. In China, it doubled. The number of aircraft in China went up 5x. In India, it's going up 3.5x. So here we are talking connectivity. Now, if I add this connectivity, this infrastructure development simply to the shift in income in India, I will tell you a very amazing number. Out of 280 million Indian households, only 6 million, 2%, consume hotel rooms. But if I look at China, it was also 2% and it became 20. In India, if it simply grows to 10%, which is only 25 million households, which is a 5x growth, there will not be a single room available for sale in this country. Let's step back now for the future of hospitality. If I look at India, I actually looked at the Ministry of Tourism, and it says there are 33 lakh or 3.3 million rooms in India, which is utter bullshit. Because there are some random guys who have more hotels than Lemon Tree does, and I've never heard of them. But if I look at Make My Trip, which is India's largest OTA platform, Make My Trip has about 1.4 million rooms on its platform. So I would reckon, broadly, there are about 1.8 million hotel rooms in India. And I'm excluding, guest houses and so on. And the branded supply is 10%. The US branded supply is 70%. Europe is 30%. The rest of the world is far ahead. So here is the opportunity. My view is when I look at my parents' generation, India was a poor country. They were purely driven by price. Quality was a very minor factor. My generation was driven by value for money. But my son's generation is hugely aspirational. They are into, I know there are multiple words used, experiential, so on and so forth, but the fact is, they like to work less and play more. And with this shift in income in India, and with these aspirations of the much younger Indians, my view is the biggest opportunity for defining the future of hospitality in India will be what has not been touched so far, which is consolidating that 80% of Indian supply, which is sub 40 rooms, which is highly different in product and service, but bringing it together, consolidating it through franchising, technology, and through quality. And if somebody does this right, it will be the next $50 billion opportunity in India. So that's my view, folks. Thank you very much.